welcome to Open Tech Convo. This is your host, Sering Omar Lo Nicolas. We are joined by Adrian to cover the last topic of our three-part mental toughness series, focused on improving mental toughness, psychological health, and physical health in the workplace. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Adrian, can you please briefly remind us what mental toughness is?
It's a style of thinking that has four parts: challenge, commitment, control, and confidence, and it results in three things: performing at a high level on a regular basis, regardless of your situations.
Interesting. All right. So let's talk a little bit about psychological health. It seems to me that mental toughness and psychological health should go hand in hand with each other. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. Without a question of a doubt. For instance, let's think of one dimension of psychological health, neuroticism. Now, I could use any version, but let's use neuroticism. Neuroticism is experiencing negative emotions such as anxiety, depression. It's a personality style, which means that you, me, and everybody can be rated on a continuum from low to high. Low levels of neuroticism is where you want to be, and those kinds of people are called emotionally stable. High levels is not where you want to be, and that's people up there are called neurotic. And there's a lot of research that shows that the more mentally tough you are, the more emotionally stable you are, and that's good. But unfortunately, there's the research that shows that the more mentally sensitive you are, the more neurotic you unfortunately are.
Oh, wow. Is psychological health related to work performance?
Oh, once again, same answer. Definitely, without a question. And let's use the same aspect of psychological health, neuroticism, once again. There's been research that's looked at employees and compared those people at the high end and those at the low end of neuroticism with different aspects of work performance. And what we know is that neurotic employees tend to be not as effective at work when it comes to skills that require interactions with other people. Neurotic employees tend to spend more time away from work, they're absent more, and they're not as satisfied with their work as emotionally stable people.
I guess I don't want to be neurotic. So what advice would you emphasize to improve psychological health?
Okay, well, try diaphragmatic breathing. 60 seconds or more every day. As far as I'm concerned, it's the most effective thing in all of psychology, and it's very easy to learn to do. In fact, when I teach my clients, they're quite surprised, one, how easy it is to learn, and two, and more importantly, how effective it is. And in fact, it's even more effective if you do it for 3 to 5 minutes, lying on your back with your feet on a chair, your knees bent at roughly 90 degrees, and your hips bent roughly 90 degrees. What you'll find is you just sink into the ground. It feels lovely. Your head clears. And if you do that every day, that ends up becoming more your way of living.
Okay. Right, let's talk a little bit about happiness. I know you are an expert on this topic. So surely one aspect of psychological health is happiness. What about happiness links it to psychological health? And is there a link between mental toughness and happiness?
Okay, you've got two questions there. Happiness is just if you like, a dimension of psychological health. So that's the easy one. And as for the link between happiness and mental toughness, as much as you might be kind to call me an expert, why not go and see a different expert, Elizabeth Stamp? She and her colleagues have done research looking at exactly that question. And she did a study which was published looking at university students. And what she found was those who were most mentally tough were also the most happy, whereas the mentally sensitive, you guessed it, were not as happy. But I've also done the same thing. I've done research, but not in universities. I've done it in hotels, 5-star hotels in Singapore, and I found exactly the same result. The mentally tough tend to be the happiest, whereas the mentally sensitive, unfortunately, tend to be more neurotic.
Okay, so I guess the next question would be, is happiness related to work performance?
Oh, definitely, without a question. There's a study done in California. They did it with human service workers and they did it with probation officers. And what they did was they went to these employees and said, can you fill out a questionnaire? It had some questions on happiness. Then the researchers went and saw the admin officer and asked the admin officer, please rate these employees in terms of their work performance. And then they looked at the two things. And what did they find? Those employees who said they were happy tend to be rated the highest in work performance by the admin officer, whereas those who said they were not so happy, well, guess what? The admin officer tended to say, well, they weren't as good workers. And that sort of backs up research from Italy. These researchers in Italy who found that the happier an employee is, the more engaged they tend to be at work, whereas the unhappy don't tend to be as engaged, absorbed in work.
Interesting. So then what one piece of advice would you give or would you emphasize to increase happiness?
Well, if I could be rude, I'd actually give you two pieces of advice. The first one being take happiness more seriously, because clearly it's going to be good for your business. But the other piece of advice, which is really answering your question, is noise. Remember, N-O-I-S-E. You want to decrease your N, but you want to increase your O-I-S-E. Now, the N, we've already been talking about, neuroticism. You do not want it, and that's why you decrease it. But you are better off if you increase your O, your I, your S, and your E. The O is optimism. Your life will be better if you think that your future and the world's future is going to get better. I, internal locus control, you will be better off if you think that your life is a result of your actions and not luck or chance. S, self-esteem, your life will be better if you like yourself versus not like yourself. And finally, E, extroversion, your life will be better if you're sociable, but not too impulsive.
All right. I guess we'll move on to physical health then. We have talked about psychological health. So we can shift the focus now to physical health. Is there a link between mental toughness and physical health?
Well, once again, all these questions are leading to yes, 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 and this is another yes. Let's take sleep. There's research that shows, and it's with adolescents. They do a study with adolescents, and they looked at mental toughness versus elements of sleep, 4 elements. And what they found was the more mentally tough an adolescent was, that 1, it took them less time to get to sleep. 2, they did not wake up as much during the night. 3, their length of sleep was longer. And 4, they had a better quality of sleep. Whereas the mentally sensitive, well, they had the opposite. It took them longer to get to sleep. They woke up more times. The quality of sleep wasn't as good, and the length of sleep wasn't as good. And there's other research that shows that if you get good sleep, your physical health is better. You have better health. For instance, there's a research that's been done with looking at only 3 of the 4 dimensions. Even just having 3 of the 4 dimensions is enough. There was a study that looked at challenge, commitment, and control, but not confidence. And what they found was that the people who had the highest levels, they had better physical health, they had better body fat levels, they had better cholesterol levels, and they had this perception of having more energy.
Interesting. So it just seems logical then that physical health is related to work performance. Could you elaborate then?
Yeah, it does seem logical. You get into tricky grounds because not everybody looks after their health. And if you are obese or if you smoke, etc., you can become quite sensitive. But the reality is the answer is very, very clear. Very clear. The more physically healthy you are, the better you will be as a worker. Research is very clear on this. In fact, there's even research that goes a step further. and says that if you become fitter, healthier, your work performance goes up. And if you don't believe me, check Peter Mills. Peter Mills did a 12-month study with a multinational corporation. And what he did was he looked at employees who participated in a health promotion program versus those who did not participate in the health promotion program. And what he found was those who participated in the health promotion program, their physical health went up, their work performance went up, and they spent less time absent away from work. Where those who did not participate did not get the physical health improvements, did not get the work health improvements, and had the same absenteeism as before.
My goodness. Then what one piece of advice would you emphasize to increase physical health?
Well, as an employer, it's fairly obvious that what we're saying here is you want healthier, fitter employees. It's pretty obvious. And probably the best one little piece of advice I can give you is a thing called nests, N-E-S-T-S. It's what birds land in. It's where they put their eggs. But for humans, it's not. Instead, it's nutrition, exercise, sleep, thinking, and social support. If you have good nutrition, and it's not hard, just simple, basic nutrition philosophy, quality, balance, etc. If you exercise, and the key word here is consistently, as long as you're not doing anything that's dangerous, then as long as you're doing something, it's better than nothing, and just do it consistently. Sleep, 8.5, maybe a bit more every night. T, positive thinking. And S, good social support, meaning good friends, family, relationships with colleagues and neighbors.
All right, you heard it from Adrian. Let's get fit. So moving on to mental toughness. It sounds like you're saying that if I improve my nests and my noise, then I will improve my mental toughness. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. You've clearly been hearing the main message. Absolutely, without questioning it down. Yeah, if you improve your nests and you improve your noise, your mental toughness will go up. Let me explain. I came up with the acronym NEST to explain the 5 things that have a huge impact on happiness. NEST. But if you think about the T in NEST, the thinking, well, that's actually your noise. And so if you do NEST and noise, it improves your happiness. But what we also know is that it also is related to mental toughness. Now, sure, there are things that are more effective and more direct to improve your mental toughness, such as, and we talked about this in the previous interviews with GOAT, you want to do growth mindset, observe, act, and trust yourself, but you don't want to do POT, perfectionism and overthinking. Now, those things will have a quicker and bigger impact, potentially, than nest and noise. But the reality is, how on earth can you have really strong mental toughness if you don't have good nest and noise? I think of nests and noise, and especially nest, which is the real foundation, as that it's literally a foundation for mental toughness. For instance, let's imagine that you don't have one of the nests, you don't have good sleep. How are you going to have good mental toughness and make good decisions if you don't get good sleep? And likewise with the noise. Let's just take the first one, which we've been talking about a lot today, neuroticism. How can you be really mentally tough? If you're neurotic, you can't. And so nest and noise gives you a foundation. And then if you have your GOAT and your POT, well, now you're well on the way for beautiful mental toughness.
All right. Let's say there's an employee that is already mentally strong. What advice would you give him or her?
Well, firstly, you might want to go and check that for yourself by having a look at a questionnaire, just to check that you're not conning yourself. But if you really are, well, then remember SAM, S-A-M. Support network, advanced psychological skills, and motivation. Right now, and the reason why I say you want to really check yourself and make sure you're not conning yourself is because there's research that's been done with elite athletes, those who won gold at the Olympics, for instance. And what that research clearly shows is it takes a large number of years to get to a high level of mental toughness. So if an employee says, I've got strong mental toughness, you do have to be willing to question it a little bit. And if they are mentally tough, they won't mind it being questioned. All right. Now, if they really are at that level, then what you do is, one, focus on, as the research on athletes found, focus on three things. One, having good relationships with friends and family, colleagues, teammates, neighbors, but especially friends and family. And anybody who's not particularly positive, spend less time with them. It's a really good strategy. The A, advanced psychological skills, right? Well, firstly, you've got the basic ones that helps build mental toughness, such as diaphragmatic breathing, which we talked about today, progressive muscular relaxation, meditation, etc. And then more advanced things like a noise affirmation or thriving habit, which has a number of steps, and so a bit harder to do. If you do those sorts of things, it really maintains your mental toughness. So it's pretty obvious that you can increase with training the S, and you can increase the A with training. Right, the A I've explained quite well. With the S, a psychologist can easily give you techniques to improve your relationships with your friends, your family, your spouse, etc. But the M, the motivation to do the task, that can't be trained. You either have a burning desire to do the task or you don't. And anybody shouting at you, screaming at you, saying you've got to take it seriously, if you just aren't uninterested, it's not going to work. So the S and the A can be trained, but the M, that's got to come from the person. And let me just go one further little quick step on that. I have a course called Develop Direction. And what it is, it's my most intense course, and it looks at values and goals. It's extremely intense. And the idea is to basically get you to really think about what kind of person you want to be, what really does matter to you, what's in your heart, what do you really cherish in the way of values. And then you set goals based on that. But guess what? If you find in the course of doing that, that your values and your goals are related to things unrelated to the task we're talking about, well, all that training isn't going to increase your mental toughness for that action. So it all has to come back to you for the motivation.
Thank you very much for sharing. Seems like you've covered the three. So I guess we could start rounding off. How about, one or two more questions? Are you okay with that?
I can do that.
All right. So would you mind telling us about one of the most enjoyable experiences you've ever had as a trainer?
Oh, as a trainer? Okay. Well, okay. I've worked with 28 sporting teams. And one of the reasons I did that is it's very easy because it's public information to be able to show that you've improved a team. It's public information, what the score was, how many goals, how many runs, how many baskets, etc. And so I could show, for instance, I'll just give you a very quick one. I worked with Malaysia cricket, and they, according to the development manager, had been losing all their matches. I think they lost 8 matches in a row. I trained them for 2.5 to 3 months, and next thing you know, they won 8 matches out of 8. But some of the ones that have really got to me, that really felt positive in the heart, etc. I went to the Caribbean and I worked with 25 organizations in 7 Caribbean countries. And one of the reasons why is I always wanted to work with Cricket West Indies, with the men's team. So I figured if I could work in the Caribbean, get enough experience, I could always say, look, I can work with Caribbean people. Anyhow, I was in Mount St. John Medical Center in Antigua. And at the end of every session, what I used to say to everybody was, please write down the answer to 2 questions. 1, what was the main message in the session? And then more importantly, 2, how do you use that information to make your life better? And the idea was people would write it in a notebook and they could remember it forever. Anyhow, at the end of one session, I'm talking to some of the clients and a staff member comes up to me, puts a piece of paper in my hand, and then walks out the door. And once everybody had gone, I sort of opened up the paper, and it was pretty obvious that she had written it, got embarrassed, didn't know if she should give it to me, screwed it up, then wanted to give it to me and opened it up and closed it, opened it up. And I'm so glad she found the confidence to do it. I can't remember the exact words, so I'm going to paraphrase, but it was something along the lines of, I always knew I had abilities and skills, but I was always afraid to go for it. But with all this training, I now know I can do it. And moments like that are amazing.
That certainly is nice. Okay. How about sharing a success story from the sports world?
Okay. Without a question of doubt. I had the honour of working with the captain of Sri Lanka cricket's women's team, Shamari Patu. That was an amazing experience. I view Shamari as like the Cristiano Ronaldo of women's cricket. She works in she plays in a country that doesn't have a lot of money for cricket, and it's not, there's issues in the way it's set up, etc. But she is so professional and she really tries. For instance, one time I'm training some of the girls and I finish a session and it's 8 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock. But I ring her up and say, look, I know it's late, but if you want, I can train you. Wait 10 minutes, I'll be there, she says. It was amazing. So she did 20, 25 sessions with me over only a 6-week period. It was phenomenal. I had a great time with her. And what she told me on the last day really, really surprised me. She told me that on the last day, that when before training with me, the best she'd ever scored was 99 runs. But within those 6 weeks of training her, she got up to 143. Now, if you think about that, that's a 31% improvement. After years and years and years of coaches telling her and training her, the best they'd ever got her was 99 runs. But in just 6 weeks, I got her an extra 31%. And the best she'd ever done was bat 35 overs in 50-over matches, and then she'd get out because she would get too aggressive. But what I did was in just 6 weeks, I got her up to batting all 50 overs on 2 occasions. And it was not because she did more physical training. She didn't go to the gym more. She didn't train in the nets more. And it wasn't differences in the style of training. It was simply she trained the most important part of her body, her brain. And as a result, she didn't get so aggressive and she went out and she scored more runs. It's the same. If I was with the West Indies, the same thing with the men. If I train them mentally, they don't have to do more training in the gym or in the nets. But as a result, they'll perform better. And it's the same thing with CEOs, chairmen of boards. If you train your brain, you can improve performance massively.
Wow, 30% in 6 weeks. That's a big improvement. It's more than I could have imagined. I think we're running out of time now. So I guess if I could squeeze one last thing, is it possible to give us one final thought to go away with?
Okay. Since we're talking to CEOs and chairmen and presidents, how about this? Employees and employers, don't be scared of the word psychology and psychologists. Instead, have a bit of courage and start to train the most important part of your body, your brain.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I'm sure this has been an insightful series on mental toughness. And for those of you who have not seen parts 1 and 2, I highly encourage you do. There will links are shared in the same channel on the playlist. And if you want to see more from Adrian, please reach out, message, and we will be sure to plan future videos. Or if you have questions, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to, as I'm volunteering him right now, as I am. So thank you for joining us here at Open Tech Convo. And be sure to check out Adrian's 2 books on Amazon. Links are shared in the description below. As I said, if you feel free to reach out to either Adrian or myself if you have any questions, and we'll be sure to give you the answers as best as we can. So thank you again. And until next time on Open Tech Convo, see you soon.